Hey everybody, how you guys doing out there? I am welcoming you guys to the show. And yes, I'm jamming out to the theme music. That is what I am doing. And this is everything I am trying to do right now to stay in a place where things are on a decent note. Because today, I'm letting you guys know I'm a gamer, I'm a nerd, I'm a comic book fan. I do a lot of things just like you guys out there do. And I want to welcome you guys to How We Roll, which is sort of a welcome, a meet and greet type thing, if you will, to explain who I am, what I do, and how much I'm just like you, to let you guys know that I'm not alone. So, or to let you guys know that you're not alone. Yeah, this has been a thing, a major thing. I'm letting you guys know out there right now that I am fading. I am Solar Grave, a cinematic sorcerer, welcoming you guys to another episode of How We Roll. Now, I'm gonna let you guys know right now, this is gonna be an episode, like seriously, a seriously hard episode, because where we left off was me leaving junior high school and going into high school. This is gonna be a tough summer. But before we get started into that, I want to invite you guys down to join me here on the YouTube chat. We already got somebody in there right now. Everybody say hello. Hello to our boy Ganja. How you doing, man? And yes, we've got Miss Maltese. And this is, again, welcome to the show. Now, like I said, today, I wanted to put out a trigger warning, but we'll get to that. Let's do some business real quick. If you guys want to join us, or you guys have any comments that you don't want to make public, that's perfectly fine. Just hit us up over at backinthedeck@gmail.com. That's backinthedeck@gmail.com. Since you are on YouTube, make sure to roll a critical hit on that subscribe button, and then back up that critical hit with the little bell notification right there, so you guys know that we are doing the thing and when we're going on. Feel free to hit us up on all the social medias, be it the Twitter, the Instagram, all that other stuff. Just look us up at Back in the Deck. That's at symbol. I don't know what it's called. BACKINTHGDECK. And if you happen to be on that wretched hive of scum and villainy that we all know as the Zuckerberg program or the Facebook, feel free to join Deckers on the Book, where you guys can talk to everybody that you were talking to now. Talk to each other when I'm not around. Show us your model, show us your art, show us all the things that you are doing to express yourself and make the world the kind of place that you want to live in. Now, if you guys really appreciate us and like what we do, I appreciate that hardcore. And of course, liking, subscribing, and sharing on the YouTube is really, really helpful. And I want to put out there that we do have a Twitch channel at twitch.tv/BID_P. And that is where we do most of our live casts, and we are talking up to 5 live casts a week, you guys. I am super duper busy doing all that. And of course, if you guys really want to help us out in a more personal and more direct way, head on over to patreon.com/BID_P. I know if any voice actors are out there, you are dying because of all of the ways that I pronounce certain words onto the mic, but I'm not that kind of musician. I'm not a microphone, I'm a bass player. But anyway, thank you guys for showing up, and just hit us up on all those things. I got my little thing here set for the notification, so if you send them emails, I can read them on the air and all of that jazz. So, I'm being let know that I sound a little bit tinny right now, and that's fine. I'm just gonna reduce a little bit of that treble so I can have a little bit of bass in my voice. Yeah, trying to get a little bass in my voice, trying to do a little business. There we go. Alright, so now that we are here, there is a lot. This is going to be a heavy one. I won't let you guys know. But first, again, the sorcery is real. So, yeah. So as I was saying, last week we wrapped up a lot of stuff, and we talked about ending the day, or ending the summer, or ending 91, with junior high and trying to find gaming groups and, playing games over the phone with my Latino friends that were in Midtown. And before I get started, I want to really back up a couple of things real quick. No, I'm not doing any retractions whatsoever. But I need to let you guys know, like, when I talk about the distance, and a lot of people are like, man, you had me. That was some rough stuff that you were going through, especially with the distances that you traveled. I get that, but there's a lot of people that don't come from Southern California. And I get that. I totally understand that because, well, not everybody lives here. So what I'm going to do is, I talked a lot about um, the 4 to 5 hour bus rides and the distances that I had to travel in order to find gaming groups. I just want to put that out there. Here we have a map, okay? And on this map, we've got the greater Los Angeles area. Now, as you can see down here, this map is huge. Send me an email if you guys want a copy of it. But I'm putting this out there right now. This right here, this is the area that I live. As a matter of fact, that where the arrow is on your screen right now is my cross street. That is where I was growing up. That is where the park was. That's all those other things. And my school was here, right on the edge of South LA. Now, that was junior high school. And when I had to ride the bus all the way to Burbank, we're talking here. So that is what 30 miles looks like. From here to here. Sorry, that's what like 50 miles looks like. You can, again, I'll be happy to send you guys this map. But yeah, right here at Route 42 and Route 110, or 42 and 110 for you guys that don't live in Southern California. And all the way here to essentially the 5 freeway, or 5 out that far. So that was the distance traveled from here to here, about 30 miles, for a kid on a bus. That was big. And that became costly both in time and, time and other resources. I seem to have forgotten something really quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you guys, just for a half a second, check out that map, see where you guys are, and just check out that distance one more time. We're talking from here to there is where I went for that particular first episode, where the people kind of gave me the bum rush out of the store. Okay, but check that out and have fun putting together those distances. Now we're going to lose sound for just a minute here. Just a minute. Because I'm kind of chipmunking here. So many technical things, but we'll be right back. We should be back now. Alright, there we go. Yeah, we're back. Alright. So these are the distances that are actually traveled. And yeah, now, currently, I live here. But I still travel that 30 miles to go see my mom every week because that's the least, that's the least that I owe her. But, yeah, this is right here, boys and girls, right where the arrow is, outside. That is where the Wizard's Tower resides. So I've kind of come a long way, and I'm appreciative of the way that I've come, not just in distance. Alright, but see, now we're going to talk about the end of my 9th grade year, okay? Having all of those things, and I'm warning you now, this is probably going to be a pretty emotional episode for me, because the summer of 91 was interesting. I had gotten involved with a few youth groups, and I spent a lot of time on the bus going to see them. But at the time, there was a major thing happening in the social consciousness, and of course, there were racial tensions. So, in order to go to places like the San Fernando Valley, which is over here, yep, this is the San Fernando Valley. Again, from here all the way through here, and it wasn't exactly safe to go to those places. And I also had friends down where I live at the bottom of the map and in Orange County, California, along with the other places. It was all over. And I'm letting you guys know right now, the scope and scale of this map is like 60 miles, 60, 70 miles. And that's a long distance to travel if you don't have a car. Now, I had a couple of friends here and there, and I would be on the bus for hours and hours and hours every weekend trying to game and all that stuff. Trying to game, trying to spend time with my friends, just doing what I could to not be in my area. And then came the summer, or the spring, rather, of 1991. Now, 1991 had a whole lot of things going. The previous year, there was a great big press case with a friend of mine from school. And she was a friend from school, but we weren't really close. There's a lady on YouTube called Miss Hybrid, who I grew up with, and she's one of the main characters that I talk about when it comes to running around playing those games of pretend. And her and Latasha were seriously big friends. And I mentioned her a little in a few episodes, where she was killed by a store owner in the summer of '89, and in the summer of '89, and in the summer of '90, the lady that killed her got no jail time. She lost the store and had to do 110 hours of community service after shooting a 16-year-old girl in the back of the head from 15 feet away. And we were messed up on this. I mean, the kids were happy that that lady was gone because we all got tired of her putting guns on us. But the year after that, like shortly after that incident, was the beating of Rodney King. Okay? And this was the first time that there was video evidence of the of police brutality. And this was a big thing for us where we were living because these things happened all the time. One of my first incidences of going into Orange County, California, to meet up with friends, maybe play some games, maybe go to the movies, and I was almost brutalized by the police department in Placentia, California. Now it's been almost 30 years. Almost 20 years, sorry. Almost 20 years. No, it's been almost 30 years. Because we're talking 90 and it's almost 2020. And, these were things that were normal. This was standard operating practice where we grew up and for us. So trying to escape those things was a big thing for me. And this is where gaming came in. And this was one of the reasons I was really trying to bring Dungeons and Dragons at the time being the only game that I knew about, into my neighborhood because we were always pretending to be other places. Um, but on April 20th, 1991, um, after the video footage of this man being beaten to disability had circled around the press, and the people where I grew up were finally saying, okay, look, you see, it's happening. Look at it. It's right there. He's handcuffed. He's being beaten by five guys. Five guys with badges, and he's being beaten by local government issued weapons that are designed to hurt people. And look at him. He's not getting up. He's not a threat, but they're just still beating him. And all five of the police officers were exonerated. They were acquitted. And the dude that got beaten just had to deal with the fact that the court of law in Los Angeles, well, the greater Los Angeles area, which was interesting because the trial was held outside of the county in Simi Valley, California, the birthplace of Ronald Reagan, the devil, and in the next county over being Ventura County. Now, I'm going to pull that map back up just to show you guys a little bit of the severity here, because this was shocking because one, the incident happened here, okay? Happened right here outside of Hyde Park, okay? And the trial was literally off the map. Simi Valley would be about, where's the 118? 118 is here, so it would be about there. This is where it would be. And that place is not a very pleasant place for people of color. Most of the time in my adolescent youth that I spent fighting white supremacists, it was spent there and in Orange County, California. And we didn't know how to handle it because there was the footage plain as day, or more to the point, there was more footage there. There was more evidence against these police officers than had been used to convict a lot of people that I knew and the people in our neighborhood knew. It was video footage of what these cops were doing, versus hearsay of what people in my neighborhood were doing. There's a thing on Netflix that's been doing the thing, Central Park 5. This was 10, 12 years after the Central Park 5. And these police officers had video evidence against them, and there was that. So, and this essentially led to the biggest thing in history that my neighborhood was known for, which was the LA riots. Okay. Again, I had two friends in the neighborhood, and I mean two friends, the people who knew pretty much everything about me and liked me anyway, kind of friends. And on April 20th, 1991, this was the result of our city. That is, it's not a very good picture, but that's Vermont Avenue, which was literally 3 blocks from where I grew up, And this is, believe it or not, this picture right here of ABC Market, that was literally across the street from my elementary school. The building is actually still there. It wasn't burned down. It was just looted. But yeah, that market, in the previous episodes where I was talking about I would buy candy from the supermarket and all that jazz. Well, this is the supermarket. That's on the corner of Manchester and Hoover. It's a crazy cute bargain place now. And this was the result, okay? And at this time in history, I did everything I could to try and escape this. What you're looking at was my home. This was my home. This was my reality. And the 5 days that the riots were going on in my neighborhood were honestly good days. They were really good days because I was an angry kid. So wanting to watch things burn because I didn't like the people that were there, I definitely didn't like the businesses. And having nowhere to put that anger, no one to talk to, no way to release it. Um, to watch the city burn was cathartic. It was very, very cathartic. I remember sitting in my room listening to the very first CD I'd ever bought, which was The Phantom of the Opera. Complete London cast, Michael Crawford, Sarah Bachman, all those, or Sarah, all those things. And I had a CD player that ran off of batteries, and they'd cut our power. And it was an interesting time because the entire city was dark. Well, it was dark as far as electricity goes, but it was lit by the fires. And my two friends that were down the street, T&E, this was where we put our imagination skills to work because we kept ourselves occupied since there was no going outside. Oh God, there was no going outside. We didn't see each other pretty much for that week. And, you know, my mom was being strong for us, but she was hurting too. And of course, I was angry listening to Phantom of the Opera interchanged, interspersed between, Phantom of the Opera and metal. This was the early '90s, so Metallica's Black Album had just come out, but I was listening like Master of Puppets and a whole lot of like Suicidal Tendencies and just the old angry stuff. And honestly, I wanted company, but the implications of these things had hit really large. Like, if this was my neighborhood, how was I going to hop a bus to the valley? You know, I mean, if you guys can see the photos, just for you guys listening on SoundCloud, I'm currently showing a picture of the United States National Guard armed with M16A2s in full camouflage gear standing outside of the post office at 82nd and Vermont. And Vermont was the big street nearest to my house. And by big street, I mean it has a freeway exit on almost every freeway that it crosses. And I lived on 90th. This was on 82nd. A block wasn't that big. And this was where role-playing became super important to me. I had to write down my thoughts, Again, right here, these are more National Guardsmen in full gear at that very same supermarket that I was talking about, the ABC Market, outside of my house. And, just going through the fact that my city had been burned to the ground after growing up under such gunfire, because again, this was the time of the corner wars where drug dealers would literally be shooting people in the street for control of the neighborhood, so that they had the right to sell drugs on those corners and make sure that they wouldn't get shot by their bosses. It was a messed up time. And again, this is where role playing came in. I could escape to a world of dragons and ogres, or I could fall into my sci-fi books. We were big on Star Trek in my house, a post-scarcity society where nobody actually had to work for a living, so we could spend all of our time evolving ourselves, becoming the people that we wanted to be, instead of looking outside of our window to take a look at how the world saw us. And this was harsh. Around the third day of the riots in Los Angeles, my mom had taken me to my friend's house in Long Beach. I had a friend by the name of Bruce, and he's no longer with us. He was an older man, and he lived in downtown Long Beach, not far from where the Wizards Tower is today. And he was like, "Wow," you know, he was offering to let us stay, to keep us out of danger, and we went for a day. Just had a talk with him to let him know that we were all right, and then we went right back home around the time that I'm not going to say martial law had been declared, but there was definitely a curfew that was enforced by the National Guard, and these were on the streets of Los Angeles. It was the first time I'd seen my mom really cry when she saw the tanks and the Apache helicopters parked in the parking lot of the Forum and in the sports arena and by USC. Partly because, she saw that this was how our leader saw us, and all of the places that these munitions were parked were where the well-to-do white folks lived in the neighborhood. So shortly after that, when I explained to her that the stuff I'm looking at, the D&D stuff, isn't devil stuff. It isn't about worshiping demons. It's about living in a world, or playing like I live in a world, where the color of your skin didn't matter, because there were also elves and dwarves and ogres. And the content of your character was the number one thing that made people attack and all that stuff. And I'm playing these lawful good wizards, and lawful good paladins and neutral good knights, but I was always being a good person going against evil in the only way that I could, as a 14-year-old prolific reader with a high IQ from a place where Uzis and 9mm Berettas were the medium of conversation. And from that point on, my mom was actually really supportive for a good while, really supportive. And so at the end of that summer, this is, I've been talking about this stuff for a little bit, and looking up the pictures and going through these memories have been kind of harsh. So please, bear with me. So over the course of that summer, I went through the books I had, and I was essentially writing a bunch of fanfic, because my mom was huge on reading. I had a lot of the classics, which was something that very few people in my neighborhood did. But there was always infomercials for the Franklin Mint. Okay, this was, go to the Franklin Mint now. Subscribe to the Franklin Library, and we'll send you Dickens and Poe, and you can read the Iliad and Great Expectations, and oh God, what was it? Not it was Canterbury Tales, and those were the things, along with the Bible, along with mythology, that I had been reading, and the occult practices that I had learned from my great-grandparents were kind of the things that kept me going and kept me sane through this, So over the course of that summer, where we're watching the places that we grew up looking, I'm pretty sure that this is off Vermont, some of those swamp meets. Oh, no. That is actually the corner of Florence and Normandy. That's where the whole thing started. And watching the aftermath of that, which was not a whole lot of gang violence. There was a mandate coming from the tops at the county jail, Folsom Prison, Chino, that there would be no more drive-bys. It was time to rebuild. And there I was, like, getting all this story fodder, and using role-playing games and the terrible skills at creative writing that I had. I was able to write campaigns that were mashups of the Canterbury Tales and what had just happened in my neighborhood. You know, I could write a story of a Latino boy trying to get all the way to Riverside with his black friend because I had just read Huck Finn. And, these were the fanfic stories that I could write. And through the medium of RPGs, I could help my friends process that same stuff too. Not gonna lie, at the time, it did not hit me as hard. I was happy for the fire. For the record, my family did not do much looting. Okay, I say much because there was no way around looting at that point. There was essentially an unspoken barrier that had been raised by the National Guard and the police department that stated if you lived in this neighborhood, you could leave, but I believe the curfew was 7 p.m. and the rioting had torn down most of our grocery stores. And if they hadn't torn them down and emptied them, they burned them to the ground. And for the record, if there are you guys out there that are thinking, well, why did they burn down their own stuff, blah, 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 because I hear that with every uprising. It wasn't our stuff. We didn't own those stores. We weren't allowed the bank loans that were needed to open grocery stores. We weren't allowed to buy the land. There was always a reason that any infrastructure funding never made it to us down there. But they were given to immigrants from Korea and Mexico and various other places for them to start as Americans, which was cool. I'm for that 100%. The big problem was that they got the loans and they opened the stores, and then they looked down at us saying, if I can do this, why can't you? Get off your lazy black butts and do something with your life, not understanding the nuance, the analog nature of bureaucracy in general, let alone bureaucracy in a country with such a racial scar. And so they own most of the grocery stores, but they treat us like garbage, pulled guns on our children, constantly didn't give us back our correct change. And whenever we called the authorities would side with the store owners and often arrest the men, specifically the men who would call. Okay, so this was big. The whole time the rest of the country was looking at us like, well, most of your men are in prison, so you guys are criminals. You need to get your stuff together before I want my tax dollars spent. Just look at most YouTube comments, and I'm sure the ones that are coming after this video. But yeah, that was the narrative, and there was nothing that we could do. So we burned it to the ground. And my family got involved in a little bit of looting, but it was mainly for groceries because there was no way whatsoever that we were going to make it from this corner right here. Well, hang on. There we go. There was no way we were going to make it from this corner right here all the way here to buy groceries and then get back here by 7 p.m. Not unless my mom took the night off of work or essentially stayed up all night by, graveyard standards, or I took the day off of school. And by this point, my other brothers had moved out. One was in the Marine Corps and he was in Iraq at the time. And there was no one to drive those distances. Like I said, 4 hours, 5 buses to get to that neck of the woods. And that was the only place that we could legally go spend our money. And if you're wondering, well, why didn't you go to Long Beach? It's 30 miles in the other direction. Well, my friend that offered us to stay at his place laughed the next time he talked because the very next day when we went to see him and we told him, no, this is our home, we have to look after our home, rioting broke out in Long Beach and the same thing happened. So yeah, but during the day, because there was no way the kids were going to school at that point. It was close enough to the summer. So it was like, all right, we're going to call this for a couple of weeks. But that summer wasn't the same. That summer was a summer of major, major scrutiny, and the National Guard didn't leave for a little while. Um, so all of the traveling by bus that I was doing came at a major risk, because at that point, I risked being outside after curfew and then being beaten by cops or even the National Guard who didn't live there, who were, so this was the summer that my mom was sweating. Um, so I stayed home more often than I would. And I got some of my friends into the stuff, but we didn't have everything that we needed to play, like dice, you know? Um, but we used role playing to kind of get us through that time. And it was, be it sitting around telling stories or playing pretend or writing stories or talking about how we were going to be doing stuff. And I had the fortune, that a lot of kids in my neighborhood didn't have, because that summer was my first time camping in Santa Barbara. And I was there with my white friends, and they thought that I was the coolest guy ever because, yeah, the looting that we did was for groceries and trash cans and ice. We were doing makeshift coolers, to keep our groceries so that we wouldn't have to loot more than once. And at this point, my mom knew that I smoked cigarettes and she smoked cigarettes. So we had like 70, 80 cartons of cigarettes. So, being the me that I was, I took 30 cartons camping and I would sell them to the kids that were there. It was the 90s. Don't at me, because I was a teenager too. So, you teenagers out there, you guys do stuff that you're not supposed to do. I don't condone it, but I understand. And that summer, I was accepted into the Hollywood High School Performing Arts program. Um, and that was the big thing that influenced my life as a performer, a writer, and a role player. Because that summer, I met my friends Jeremy, Chris, Brian, Alex, Jose, and Andrew. And these were all people from different social circles within the performing arts thing. So it was the first time I was a social butterfly. And of those of those five social circles, three of them played role playing games. And this was when I found out there were other games, outside of Dungeons and Dragons. That's where I found out about BattleTech, which was more of a tabletop miniatures game, but you had giant wobots going pew pew pew, and I'd found out about Vampire the Masquerade, which had come out, a little bit later, but that's a different episode. But I found out about Cyberpunk, and like Cyberpunk was huge because as much as fantasy gave me escapism, I still felt on the outside because there wasn't much people of color representation. Let me explain. Okay. Like I said, the color of your skin didn't matter inside the context of the stories, okay? There could be black people and Asian people, I suppose, because all it focused on was race human, and then race elf, and race halfling. You see what I mean? But for those of you guys that are old enough to remember when Star Trek Voyager came out, the idea of a black dude playing a Vulcan, oh my God, um, and the idea of a person that wants to play an elf with dark brown skin and not a drow wasn't really thought about in D&D. But then you get to games like Cyberpunk, that's future and happens to be written by a black guy. And this, like, my head exploded in the same way a 12-year-old boy's head explodes when he find out that girls like being touched sometimes. And again, just done. Like, oh my God, a black dude wrote a role playing game. This is unheard of. This is scary. And this was when I came across the economic disparity, because a lot of my friends at Hollywood High School, they read the books. They read the the Dragonlance books by Hickman and Weiss that I was fortunate to come across in a Walden books. But this Walden book didn't have all the D&D stuff, and they were doing the Read Your Own Adventures of Forgotten Realms, and they had like computers, and they could play the computer games, and they were doing stuff on these things called BBSs, where they were playing role-playing games with people all over the world through their modems, and my family couldn't afford a computer. You know, just think about that. Couldn't afford a computer. If you're asking, if you're asking, how could I afford to go camping and not afford a computer and stuff like that? It was real simple. I could save up a lot of the food that I would eat during the week and just take it for a weekend as long as I was sparse. And the camping trip itself was only $25 for entry. So all I had to do was pack up some food, find a ride, and like I said, Riots selling cigarettes, I could buy that stuff. And when I had the money to buy a computer, I literally didn't know where to go to buy one, you know, because again, this was my neighborhood after it burned, you know, so there was no Best Buy. We had Circuit City back then, but the nearest Circuit City was in a town called Lakewood, which is a suburb of Long Beach, which I refuse to enter to this day, like to this day. I lived there for a little while, and I got issues. But anyway, yeah, so, you know, but doors were being opened to me by my friends at school that had these things, that had the computers, that had the Choose Your Own Adventure Forgotten Realms book. And I'm like, wait, I can read a book and decide the outcome? Oh my God, this is like the things I had in the library where I used to die of explosive decompression. Oh my God, you know. And they would loan me books, and I would read the books and all that stuff. And they're like, will you play? You got a character? And I showed them my wizard. And by that point, he had made it up to like 7th level. And that was kind of where I found my first role-playing ilk. Now, I hadn't learned things like power gaming or twinking or min-maxing. But what I started to learn was that there was a difference between the game as played on the board and the players who play the games, you know. But I'll get into that next week when we talk about the rest of the year of 91 into 92, where my closest friends graduated and the next load of nerds and role players came. But I want to thank you guys for showing up today. The chat has been really, really active. And yeah, Ganja, Cyberpunk is old. It is OG role-playing, along with Shadowrun. I can send you links to our How We Roll, or not How We Roll, but our fluff talks on those games, because yeah, Cyberpunk was a great big thing, and I was a big fan of, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, and you know, so I want to thank everyone for showing up. This has been a hard episode. This has been hard, but you know, I made it through. We're doing the thing, but it's time I got played out like I was at the Oscars. So I want to do a major thanks to our #1 patron. That would be Mr. Paul Mansfield, who is in the chat for once. He is actually in the tier that allows us to, you know, say who he is on every single one of our shows. And if you guys want to join us and all that stuff, it's a little too late today because we are wrapping up. Feel free to send us an email, though, over at backinthedeck@gmail.com. It's BACKINTHEDECK@gmail.com. Follow us on the social medias like Twitter and Instagram, and you can find us there at Back in the Deck and all that stuff. And of course, oh hey, Mr. Dingle. Anyway, you can hit us up on the SoundCloud. Listen to the audio of our stuff. That's at soundcloud.com/BID_P. And of course, join our group, Deckers on the Book, if you are a member of that wretched hive of scum and villainy known as Facebook. Yeah, and of course, thank you guys for showing up for How We Roll. This show is happening every Tuesday around 2-ish in the afternoon. I aim for 2. But I'm running the whole studio by myself. I want to hire an assistant, but we don't make enough money for that. But if you want to help us out on that, then roll a critical hit on that like and that subscribe. Share this stuff. Back up that critical hit on the subscribe button with a successful attack roll on that little bell, so you guys know that we're out. And I can't say your entire name. This is a PG-13 show, Chad. But yeah, or you guys can feel free to hit us up on our Patreon at patreon.com/BID_P and ask for as little as $1 a month. You can help us keep these lights on. And again, all of our shows eventually go on to the Patreon, and that is where we're keeping our entire archive. Feel free to do all that jazz, and ooh boy, there are other tiers like Patreon only streams, and I send you guys like terrain pieces, and if you're not role players, that's fine. Terrain pieces count as toys, and I know y'all know a kid or two, so just give them the toys and all that jazz. And of course, at a certain tier, I mention your name in the episodes of what we do as one of our executive producers, like I'm saying about Mr. Paul Mansfield. And with that, I'm going to say thank you guys again for showing up. I'm putting up our contact information one more time and saying, hit us up with all that stuff. Send me an email. And remember, if anybody tells you guys that you can't have the hobbies you like because of the circumstances of your birth, be it race, religion, creed, gender identity, sexual orientation, your disability, or even your budget, you tell them that I said to take those cards and put them back in the deck. This is Solar Gray, the Cinematic Sorcerer, saying we'll see you guys next week on Buster Recap. And of course, follow us on our Twitch channel at twitch.com/BID_P. Later, guys.